Hello everyone, welcome to Toronto Interpreters Practice, the first practice session in the new decade. To open our practice session, I decided to come out of my comfort zone and make a speech in my B language. I acknowledge that this may not be the perfect speech, but in real life you don't always get speakers who are native English speakers. So this might be a good practice for you for a non-native speaker. So here goes. Since the first automobile was built by Carl Benz in 1885, cars have come a long way. Modern-day automobiles have numerous features that add to their performance and safety. One of the features that we almost take for granted is the safety airbag. So today, I'm giving you a crash course on airbags and how they work. Honestly, it'll probably have more information about airbags than you ever need to know. Fun fact, in Canada, unlike seatbelts, airbags are technically not required in cars. You could legally have the airbags in your car turned off. However, in the US, starting model year 1998, all passenger vehicles sold in the US are required by law to have airbags. So cars sold in Canada, like the ones in the US, do have airbags, but if you turn them off, you wouldn't be breaking the law. Rudimentary predecessors of airbags were invented in the early 1950s. Back in the day, cars were able to travel faster, and with speed came more severe crashes and, unfortunately, more deaths. At one time, in the US, on average, the weekly death toll from car crashes was 1,000, and most of the people who lost their lives in crashes were young men. At 52,000 deaths per year, America was losing more of their young men on the highway than in the wars. As you would expect, there were calls for the government to be more involved in automotive safety issues. To be fair, even today, accidents are still the leading cause of death in Canadians aged 1 to 34, and I would imagine it's the leading cause of death for young people in many other countries as well. But the numbers are much lower thanks to safety features such as the airbag. During the 1950s and the 1960s, airbags were improved by engineers and scientists from all around the world, and breakthroughs were made. One of the important breakthroughs in the development of airbag was when Alan K. Breed, an American engineer, came up with a system that could detect a crash with a ball and tube kind of mechanism and inflate the airbag within 30 milliseconds. In 1973, Ford Motor Company built a fleet of Chevrolet Impalas, and these were the first cars to have airbags installed. But the fleet of Impalas were exclusively for government use. The first car with passenger airbag sold to the public was the 1973 Oldsmobile Toronado. A few years later, more cars built by GM, Cadillac, and Buick offered airbag options. However, airbags were very expensive, costly for the manufacturers, and the cost was inevitably passed down to the consumers. So in the next 2 decades, Ford and GM lobbied heavily against airbags, claiming the device was inappropriate, not feasible, failed to gain customer interest, and warning that airbags are very dangerous to children. Decades of public debate and policy change ensued. Although airbags gradually gained traction, as I mentioned earlier, it was not until 1998 that they were legally required to be installed in cars in the US. In a similar vein, in Europe, mainstream cars did not have airbags until the early 1990s. In 1991, BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Volvo started offering airbags in some of their high-end, more expensive models. but it did not take long for airbags to become a standard feature in most cars. Today, when you shop for a new car, it is impossible to find one without at least 3 or 4 airbags. So let's talk about how exactly airbags can save lives and mitigate serious injuries. We all know that airbags inflate when a bad crash happens, to act as a cushion so that the occupants in the car do not bang into some hard surface in the car. That's the basic idea. But when you think of it more carefully, there are actually a lot of requirements for the airbag. First of all, the airbag has to deploy very quickly. A crash can happen within 30 milliseconds, or 0.003 second, and that's faster than the blink of an eye. You don't want the driver's head to hit the steering wheel first and then get punched back by the airbag. So the car would have to know that it's in a crash, trigger the airbag, and inflate it faster than 0.03 second. You also want to make sure that only a crash bad enough to cause substantial damage to inflate the airbag. You don't want it to deploy when it's just a fender bender or when you hit a pothole on the road. The airbag system has 3 main components: the crash sensor, the inflator, and the bag itself. The crash sensor, as its name may suggest, is responsible for detecting the crash. In most jurisdictions, the regulations require the sensor to trigger the inflator when deceleration is greater than 14 miles per hour or 23 kilometers per hour. But that doesn't equate to what the car is traveling far faster than 23 kilometers per hour. If the car hits a brick wall at 23 kilometers per hour, the wall will not move and the airbag should deploy. But if the car hits another car, the first car is going to push the second car. And for the airbag to inflate, the first car would have to travel at about double that speed, 46 kilometers per hour. And I have experience with this because, as I told you guys earlier, I was rear-ended a few years ago, and both of us were traveling faster than 23 kilometers per hour, but the airbags did not deploy. I'm using crash sensor here as a general term. There are a number of different sensors that contribute to the car's decision on whether or not to deploy the airbags. For example, there are impact sensors, brake pressure sensors, seat occupancy sensors, and so on. But one of the most important sensors is the accelerometer, which detects sudden changes in speed. Once the deceleration surpasses the threshold, and perhaps along with information gathered by other sensors, the car makes a split-second decision to deploy the airbags to protect its occupants. Now the crash has already happened and the sensor's job is done. Let's move on to the next component, the inflator. The inflator is responsible for filling up a balloon, for filling up the airbag. But it's not as simple as filling up a balloon, because that would be too slow for a collision. If an airbag is deployed too slowly or too late, the risk of injury for the occupant may actually increase. In the early days, scientists thought of using a compressed gas canister to inflate the airbag. But whether there would be room in the car for the canister, and if the canister would remain stable at high pressure over time at different temperatures, became an issue. The process of inflating a modern-day airbag is a chemical reaction, inspired by rocket engines and rocket fuel. Older airbag inflators contain sodium azide, an explosive compound stable under normal temperature. In a crash, a small explosive called a squib ignites the sodium azide, which explodes and quickly decomposes into nitrogen gas and sodium metal. The nitrogen gas from this reaction is what fills up the airbag. But this is not the end of the story. The other product of the reaction, sodium metal, is very chemically active. It's so active that we don't normally see it in its metal form in real life. We only see it in compounds. And sodium can even react with water vapor in the air to create sodium hydroxide, which is a very corrosive, strong base that can cause skin burns. So to prevent this from happening, manufacturers add other compounds such as potassium nitrate and silicon dioxide to quell the reactivity of sodium metal. Newer airbag models use guanadine nitrate to produce nitrogen gas, but the idea is the same. And guanadine nitrate is also used in gas generators and solid rocket propellants. Both sodium azide and guanadine nitrate are otherwise harmful chemicals to humans. Sodium azide is lethally toxic, and guanadine nitrate can cause harm to the eyes, the skin, and the respiratory tract. But thanks to these chemicals, the airbag can expand at a speed of 322 kilometers per hour, or 200 miles per hour. And that's so fast, you cannot see it expand. The last component of the airbag is the bag itself. There is nothing overly fancy about the bag. It is made of a thin nylon fabric and folded into the car's steering wheel, dashboard, seats, doors, and more recently, even inside the seatbelt. Cornstarch or talcum powder is used to line the inside of the bag to prevent it from sticking together over time. Both cornstarch and talcum powder are main ingredients in baby powder and are not harmful to humans. After the bag inflates, the nitrogen gas dissipates and escapes through the little vents and holes in the fabric, so the occupants has room to move around. It is also worth noting that because of the design of the steering wheel and dashboard, they are not recoverable after the airbag deploys, meaning in most accidents in which airbags are triggered, the cost to repair the vehicle would likely exceed the value of the vehicle, so that the car would be a write-off. That means even if there are no injuries or only otherwise minimal damage to the car, if the airbags are deployed, the vehicle is gone. There are some safety precautions you need to know about airbags. As I mentioned earlier, the airbag expands extremely quickly, and you wouldn't want that to punch you in the face at full force. The risk zone for the driver airbag is the first 3 inches or 10 centimeters. So the safe distance from the steering wheel is 10 inches or 25 centimeters from the steering wheel to your chest bone. So that means you don't want to sit like this and to lean forward when you drive your car, because that's not safe in case the airbag deploys. The rules for children are different. The deployment of airbag is so powerful that it can kill a child sitting too close to the airbag, or, God forbid, if the child is unbuckled and is thrown into the airbag. So the rules are, apart from always buckling up, is to seat children under the age of 12 in a properly installed and age-appropriate child seat in the rear. Also, infants under the age of 1 and weighing less than 20 pounds in rear-facing child seats must always ride in the back seat. According to statistics, airbags have saved 150,000 lives between 1975 and 2001 in the US alone. Along with other safety features that are becoming more advanced, such as lane departure sensors and automatic crash braking system, they are going to continue to save tens of thousands of lives across the world. But it is important to always keep in mind that no matter how smart your car becomes, or how many airbags your car has, nothing makes you invincible. Buckle up, don't speed, and always drive sober. These are always the rules to follow. The best way to survive an accident is to never get into one. Thank you very much.